Hello everybody and welcome to my show called The Next Move. My name is Loner Druid. A lot of you will know me from chess.com and well, if you don't, you can add me as a friend or you can obviously follow me on Twitter. And please, if you can, just subscribe to my channel if you like what I do. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the coaching titles that you can get from the FIDE website. So our first bunch of lessons will be under the development instructor. What is a development instructor? Well, it's obviously the kind of coach that helps you to just find the basic developments of the game. Usually these are your kind of coaches that you'll get at schools and basic places. So our first lesson will be about the mechanics of the chessboard and the pieces. What I try and do in this lesson is to just try and show you from a mathematical point of view why the pieces have their value and what the pieces are capable of. One of the big things that you will hear a lot of the time is that you need to control the center or attack the center. There's a big reason for this, and with a little bit of help of math, we're going to show you that from a further point of view. If any of you saw the show recently with Danny Wrench, Amateurs the Amateur Hour, then you will have seen that it was a big thing. It was about the center, it was about opening principles, etc. So hopefully this will help you understand a little bit more about why the center is so important. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go through every piece separately and show you a little bit of stuff about that piece itself. So first we'll start with the pawn. Now obviously when a pawn starts in the starting place, then it can either move 2 squares or 1. Okay, now if you just notice from there, let's say we move it 2 squares, let's move this king. From here the pawn can only go 1 square at a time. Okay, even if it had to capture diagonally, then it would still just go 1 square. Okay, so the pawns, just in case you don't know, is worth 1 point only. One of the cool things about the pawn, of course, though, is that if it were to get to the other side of the board, then it could promote itself to either a knight, bishop, rook, or queen. Can't get another king because you only had one of those, and you can't get a pawn because you already are one. Cool. So pawns are really simple, just to understand that they are very limited in their movement. They can only go 1 square at a time, which is why their value is only 1 point, which is quite low. But of course, like we've said here, it can promote and become much stronger. For this very reason, pawns in the end game are much stronger than in the beginning of the game. Okay. Now we're going to quickly add the bishop, just so that you can see. Let's remove this king, put it back where it was, just remove the queen, and let's start with a white bishop. Okay, so as you can see, I have put the bishop in the center of the board, okay, which is usually these 4 squares, and we can add a little bit more, and we can say that there's a bigger center, obviously, around it. Okay, so any of these squares, generally the pieces will be best placed. Why? Okay, let's have a quick look at, let's just move something real quick. I'm just going to move it there, move this there, and move it back. Okay, so now what we'll see here is that because the bishop is in the middle of the board, we can count quickly how many squares this bishop can go to from being in the center. Yada. Now let's just move my king a little quickly here. Okay, so let's just count it again. There we go. We've got this, we've got that, we've got that. Okay, let me just show you that nicely with some arrows. Okay, so if we count the green squares here, you'll count that there is 13 possible places it can go. Okay, now the big thing about a bishop is to note that if we put it in the corner, suddenly the amount of squares it can go to has changed dramatically. Okay, it has gone from 13 squares to only 7 possible squares. Okay, so the more to the side of the board the piece is, the less squares it can go to. Okay, if we go and put it in the corner, you can see 7 squares. If we put it, let's say, over, let's just move my king, put the bishop here. Oh, my bad. Put the bishop here, put the king over there, put the bishop here. Okay, now it's again on the side of the board. Okay, so we can highlight the squares again. And you can see it's still 7 squares. Okay, Still go 7 squares from the side of the board. So the least amount of squares a bishop will ever be able to go to is 7 squares. Of course, as long as there's no pieces in its way. Okay, so between 7 and 13 squares what it can go. Now a bishop is worth 3 points, and what you also have to remember is whatever color the bishop starts on is the only color it can go to. So if it's a white squared bishop like this one, then it can only go to white squares. Okay, that's basically what you need to know about a bishop. Let's move on. Let's put a knight out here in the center. Let's move this king again. There we go. That's white to move. Perfect. So now, if we look at this, we can quickly have a look at where the knight can go. Knight has 8 different squares that it can go to from being in the center. Okay, if this knight was not in the center, then it also dramatically changes the amount of squares it can go to. Okay, so let's go put this knight in the corner real quick, just so you can see. Okay. Now, if we look at the poor knight, it only has 2 squares that it can go to. So obviously, a knight is worth a lot less when it's in the corner of the board than what it is in the middle. Because in the middle, it has more places it can go to. Obviously, if it's in the middle, it can go left and go right, and go forward to attack, and go backwards to defend as well. So this helps your pieces, from being in the center, it helps your pieces to be stronger. Simple rule of thumb. Okay, one thing you have to need to know about a knight as well, just for interest's sake, is that once a knight is on a white square, it will always move to a black square. Okay, if it's on a black square, same thing, it'll always move to a white square. Simple rule of thumb. Okay, now a knight is also worth 3 points, and one thing you have to remember is that it's the same as a bishop. The reason why is because the knight can go to different color squares where a bishop cannot. And the knight can jump over pieces. Just as an example, I'll make this nice and simple. There we go. Okay, so the knight could jump over the king. Okay. So for this very reason, because the knight can go to less squares than the bishop can, but can jump over pieces and go to different colors, to dark squares and white squares, it's obvious that the knight, this is why the knight is the same amount of points, or roughly, okay? It also depends on where the piece is, which is why we are showing this. Okay, next piece up on the list is our rook. So put the rook over here. Perfect. Okay, so now we can have a quick look from the center. How many squares can this rook go to from where it is? Okay, if you quickly count that, you'll see that it's 14 squares. Okay. Now there's an interesting thing to note here about a rook, is that it doesn't matter where the rook is, as long as there's no pieces in its way, it's always going to be able to go 14 squares. I'll show you an example. We go put it right in the corner, and obviously if we go ahead and we count those, then you'll quickly see that it's still 14. Okay, we can put the rook in some funny place. Let's put it over here, just to show you once again. And you'll still note, okay, if the king wasn't there, you'll still note that it would have been 14 squares. Okay, so the rook is worth 5 points. And the reason why it's worth more points than the bishop and the knight is for this very reason. It can also go to both color squares, just like a knight can, where a bishop cannot. And of course, it doesn't matter where it is on the board, as long as there's nothing in its way, it can always go 14 squares, which makes it a much stronger long-range piece. Okay, last but not least, we have our queen. Let's bring out the queen. Let's put her over here, just so we can see it. Okay, now this one's a little bit of a counting job, because she has a lot of squares that she can cover. If you're going to count them real fast, or if you just know the answer, you'll know that the answer is 27 squares. Whoops. If it is in the center. Okay. If it's only in the corner, we'll show you real quick. It's only in the corner. Let's move her there. And then you can see that it is only 21 squares. But it's still a lot, isn't it? I mean, if a rook is only 14, then 21 is still a lot more than a rook. Okay, so queen is the strongest piece on the board for this very reason, because she can cover a lot of squares at the same time. Okay, another interesting thing then to look at then, after we've looked at that, is to say if we have a rook and a bishop, and we put it against the queen, we know that the queen is worth 9 points, and the rook and bishop together would be worth 8 points, 5 plus 3. So the queen is worth more points than the rook and bishop because it can do the same work as a rook and a bishop, but it's only one piece. The rook and the bishop together is 2 different pieces, so in order to make progress with them, you'd have to make 2 moves, where the queen could do the same thing in 1. Now if we add 2 rooks to this mix instead, we say something like this, we know that a rook plus a rook is 5 plus 5 gives you 10 points, which is worth more than a queen. So if the 2 rooks are next to each other like this, or we can put them somewhere else, they could cover up to 27 squares, same as the queen. So they cover the same amount of squares, but the big difference is that the 2 rooks can defend each other. So they can never be taken by a solo queen. So as long as the 2 rooks are defending each other, the solo queen is slightly weaker, only 9 points versus the 10 points. Okay. Last piece we can have a quick look at. We can obviously just take off these pieces here. And we can just have a look at the king. Okay, if we look at a king, let's move it up. You can see that the king can go to 8 squares when it's in the middle of the board. But of course, if all the pieces wants to be in the middle of the board, then that's the last place the king wants to be. Unless, of course, there's no more pieces on the board. Then the king wants to become active as well, because the king can be a strong piece. Okay, so to round off this, to finish off this little mathematical idea of ours, I want to also show you a little bit of extra math. On the first move, white can make 20 different moves. I hope you all can count that real fast. The pawns can move either once or twice, and then we could also move, this knight can move there, this knight can move there. Okay, so that's 16 plus 4, it's 20 moves. Okay, same with black, 20 possible moves that it can make on its first move. A computer, in general, would most likely prefer e4 over any other opening move for the following reason. Because after e4, it gives you more possibilities of extra moves. And obviously, the more moves you have, the more chances you can get to obviously make different kinds of moves, to attack, to defend, etc. So after this move, if we have to count them all again, okay, pawns can go there, 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 there. Okay, so that is 15 moves. Okay, but now we have a bunch of added ones. Okay, now we're gonna go knights. Okay, so that is another 5. It's 20 moves, and we'll make the bishops. Can I do a different color? Yeah, we'll do the bishops. We'll make it yellow, and the queen will make yellow as well. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 28 moves plus we have the king. It's 29 moves. Okay, so we went from 20 possible moves to 29 possible moves. If, of course, let's say black plays h6, how does this change anything? Let's have a look. Sorry. If we now count the amount of moves that black has after this, still has that. Okay, sorry. He has the knight. 1 square less for the knight, and he has the rook move. So now you'll note that black only has 19 different options. Okay, so he's gone down. He's gone from 20 possible moves to only 19. Okay, and it keeps on increasing. Now after white's moved d4, taking the center here, nice control. Now he's got this other bishop out as well, and an extra square for the knight, and extra squares for the queen, and extra squares for the king. So from a mathematical point of view, this is what a computer would most likely look at, an engine, because it bases everything on math. Okay, so every little inch of the board that it has more control over gives him a smaller edge. Every extra move that he can make gives him a smaller edge. So this is how a computer most likely would consider different moves to be different strengths, purely on math. So that's why we'll end the first lesson. Just a little bit of a big mathematical idea for you to understand why the center is so important for your pieces, because your pieces can do so much more from those squares. If you guys like what I'm doing, then please subscribe to my channel. Hopefully we can maybe get something going on chess.com as well. And before I end the show, I would just love to send out a shout out to the Chess Bros. Eric, Robin, Aman, you guys are great. Love your shows. And yeah, maybe one of these days I can be on one of your shows for a little bit of fun. Thank you guys. And please, look forward to lesson number 2, which will be about just some basic tactics. That'll be our next lesson.